Okay, very good. We are starting James here, and I just want to remind you again that the wrong answers are as important as the right answers. And as you've had a chance to, think about the question that you're going to participate in, this will give you a chance to think. Don't worry about if you're not going to say enough. That's what I'm here for. Okay, I practice in talking. Okay, I have notes, from what I thought, especially since I made up the guide, I know what I was looking for. So if you don't get it, that's okay. Um, we are gonna go only for just a few questions. I'm not going to try to race through the study. We can have a time of fellowship after that, and hopefully we'll all talk long-winded enough that we won't get done in 2 minutes and say, okay, got my twiddle my thumbs for the screen here, and not know what we're doing. Okay, so yeah, so I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. When you go to work on the answer that you're going to be given, you want to try to think, why is the wrong answer wrong? Okay, what is it about that wrong answer that makes it wrong? And I'll be I'll be uh, contributing that tonight because I'll do some of the wrong answers. Okay, if you look in your book on page 1, where it says James, the Proverbs of the New Testament, whenever you go to study a book, number one, you keep in mind the sermons on Sunday morning that I've been preaching lately, and I got a few more about. It's all about the Bible that I've been covering, why the Bible is so important to us, the knowledge that we get from it, the truth that's there, the inspiration of every single word, how the Bible changes us. We're going to be looking at, for instance, this Sunday morning, the battle for the Bible and what attacks are being made against it. And that's I trust will be very interesting for everybody too. And so as we look at the Bible, we engage then in Bible studies like this. I like to do them because we want to understand what these books are about. James, you'll see here, has been called the New Testament book of Proverbs, the New Testament book of Proverbs. When you think of Proverbs, you think of wisdom, things that are practical to be able to take into account in our spiritual lives. And so when you go to James, you're going to be thinking in terms of practicality also. And so you're going to look at the wisdom that it exhibits for just living your Christian life. Now, for instance, here it says James makes 23 allusions to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. You can find 23 connections in there. Now, there is no theological doctrine that serves as a theme. That doesn't mean there's no theological doctrine at all. It's just that there's nothing that serves as a theme. It's very practical. When you think of books of the Bible that have themes, okay, especially with the New Testament, if you want to look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what is the doctrinal theme of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Jesus' life. So this would come under the doctrinal heading of Christology. Christology, the study of Christ. Okay, if you wanted to look at the book of Romans, okay, Romans is a book that's really heavy emphasis on which doctrine would you say? Salvation, the road to salvation. And then there's an eschatological point in some chapters in the end. If you looked at the book of Galatians, what would be the doctrinal theme in Galatians? That you would be the Judaizers losing salvation or not being saved by works, that we're saved only by faith. That would come under soteriology. And you can do this with Thessalonians, with end times. You could do this with Hebrews, which is all about Christ. You see how they have a theological theme that they're all about? Well, James has a lot of practical wisdom. And boy, when you get to chapter 3, chapter 3 is one of my favorite chapters, deals with the tongue. Okay. Probably one of the best practical thing that you could get to in all of life. Okay. So He's writing to people who are already saved. This is important if you want to understand James, because historically, people have looked at some things where James talks about works in chapter 2, and they're like, oh, see, you get saved by works. You have to have works to get saved. And he has a very carefully constructed argument. He is not teaching that you have to have works in order to get saved. And I'll give you a clue ahead of time. It talks about how works are a manifestation of our faith. They are not how to get saved. It's because you are saved. Works are the results. And that's why it says, James 2:18, yea, a man may say, thou hast faith and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Okay, so works, again, fitting in very much with the theme of practicality. Okay, so we're going to look at James 1, verse number 1 to, we're going to read up to verse 4. Okay, but I don't think we're going to cover verse 4. So we have James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. And I think Elijah had the question that deals with verse 4, so he's not able to be here tonight. So we're definitely not going to get to verse 4. Okay, we'll look at these first 3 verses. Okay, so I thought it was really interesting. We were talking about James last Friday, and Harold, was very well aware that, who wrote the book of James. But Maya has the question. So, which James was the author of the book of James? Microphone for Miss Maya, please. So what do you have to share with us, Miss Maya?
I do find this one very interesting. I asked 2 people and I got 2 different answers. Okay. So I wanted to get their opinion. I should have been on the streets recording and saying, hey, can you tell me who wrote? Because I might have gotten more than just those 2 different answers. But when you study to show yourself approved, you'll learn that all of the answers are right here between Genesis and Revelation. This is not the James, the apostle, that the former fisherman or the brother of John. And when you read in Matthew chapter 13, verses 55 and 56, Matthew 13, 55 and 56 read, is not this the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas and his sisters? Are they not all with us, whence they have this man all these things? James is the half-brother of Jesus. He's also the leader of Jerusalem Church, and he is the author of the book of James.
Okay, now, one of the things that's interesting about James is that, he's the half-brother of Christ, but that's important because Christ had to be born of a virgin to be able to be God, joined with man in the flesh. But it didn't have anything, there's no problem with there being half brothers later on. In fact, at the end of Matthew chapter 1, I believe it is, that they didn't have any children until Jesus was born. And so you could have other brothers and sisters. He ended up being really kind of the leader in the church. After salvation, he wasn't a believer before the resurrection. Okay, so after the resurrection, he got saved evidently, and he was up there kind of a little bit more significant than Peter was. Okay, because when there was a dispute later on over the Gentiles coming into the church with or without the rituals, okay, James was the one who delivered the statement that was being taken back up to Antioch in order to answer that, no, you didn't have to have the Jewish rituals in order to cover to get you part of the church. And one of the things that I find interesting about this is that James he doesn't claim anything in this verse introducing himself. When you look at some of the other epistles, Paul will give introductions of himself, all right. Okay. And he'll, maybe a number of verses long, and he'll say hi to some people and things like that. Okay. James doesn't do this. He couldn't he though? He could say, ha, 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 I'm the brother of Jesus. And I knew him when he was just a lad, my big brother, and I saw him at home, and I grew up with him and saw what he was like. I mean, he could have boasted on that, couldn't he have? Okay, he could have come off as some kind of pope. Okay, he could have claimed that. Well, again, because hey, I'm the half brother of Christ, and you should treat me better. No, he doesn't do any of that. Okay? He just he has this exercise in humility. Okay, he still exercised humility. Okay, now Joe had question number 2, so um no, I'll just go over it because I'm just thinking of the making the connections. Yeah, I'll just do it. Okay. Uh, I don't mind so much because he's going to be here in the pulpit next Thursday and he's going to have a lot of this stuff to do. So I don't mind doing this. Okay. Question 2. What is notable about the introduction that James gives in verse number 1? Okay. So let me read James 1 again. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, of the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, reading. Okay. And that's it. So what would somebody say is the right answer? What's notable? Is it's brevity, it's profundity, or it's sensitivity? What do you think? It is it's brevity. Okay, it's brevity. It's brief. It's very short. And when you think of the word profundity, we're thinking about something profound, something very deep. Okay. Let me talk about the brevity because this is an important concept. You want to have some Bible understanding. Okay. What I'm about to explain to you is a very important concept, is to keep things brief. Okay. They say about being a speaker, keep it simple. Simon. Keep it simple, soup. Okay. We were told in Bible college that you stand up, you speak up, you shut up, and you sit down. Okay. So brevity is an important quality. People get in trouble for having too many words. One of my favorite verses talks about how in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin. So the more you speak, the more you get yourself in trouble, especially if you got one of the homicide detectives interviewing you. Make sure you say the same thing each time. Keep it simple. It's been said that brevity is the soul of wit. Brevity is the soul of wit. When you think about comedians, they say an awful lot in just a few words, maybe just a look on their face. Will Rogers is somebody, when I see his comments and things like that, his quotes online, I like to utilize those. He was from the early 1900s, and he was a kind of like some of our pundits today. And he gave us such concise humor as live in such a way that you would not be ashamed to sell your parrot to the town gossip. Okay. Yeah. Or everybody is ignorant only on different subjects. Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And so those things, those are extremely valuable. Okay. Because of their brevity. You don't say in 1,000 words what you can say in 100. And this is what we call the art of elegance, the art of elegance. Okay, where your statements can take care of many questions. And so when I was sharing this um, Emmanuel, we were talking about, if you have a lady who's gotten, a lot of, jewelry and all fixed up and everything, and she's supposed to be very beautiful. Um, then you have another lady who's equally beautiful, but she is not over made up and not overly done. Okay. And yet she's still beautiful because of the simplicity of her outfit. That's what you would call elegance. Okay. Some people think elegance is show offiness. No, it's the opposite of show offiness. It is keeping it simple, simple beauty. Now, this comes into a problem in theology because regularly we'll get somebody with a statement that is made that sounds really, like it's very powerful. How about like when a theologian tries to sound so smart by declaring there is not a random molecule in the universe. Okay, there's not a random molecule in the universe. Sounds elegant. It's not saying 1,000 words, it's saying just a few words. However, you got to think about that. Okay. The suggestion is that God is in control of every molecule. People, the people in that theological school, they like to really um, try to exalt God, which is great. Okay. You just got to make sure you exalt him with stuff that actually exalts him. Okay. If there's not a random molecule in the universe, and that this suggests that God and his sovereignty controls all things, it seems like this is a statement exalting the power and wisdom of God. However, it actually raises more questions. Okay. Does man have a free will, or is he a puppet on a string? Well, yeah, free will. Okay. Random molecule, no random molecule would suggest that he's a puppet on a string. What do we do with the free will argument? Or does God controls, for instance, if I had a knife in my hand, does God control the molecules in the knife? Oh, yeah, sure, that'd be great. Does God control the molecules in my hand and my brain? And so when I go to stab somebody and kill them, wait, if God was in control of all those things, does that make God the author of sin and making God the murderer? No. Okay, so you see what happens here. You can say something nice and deep, there's no random molecule in the universe, but if it raises more questions than it answers, it's not elegant, it's troublesome. And this happens an awful lot in theology. So by being brief, James implies many things. There's a lot of things that come out of this. His humility as a hard-won convert, okay, because he's not boastful. His identity as a servant and not a pope. He's just a servant. Okay. The significance of the practical wisdom that's going to follow. It's going to be nice and short and easy to digest. Okay. And also the identity of a struggling people, the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. The opposite of elegance is a Rube Goldberg device. How many people know about a Rube Goldberg device? Oh, okay. Well, I showed Emmanuel something. Okay. If you go back to the old time comics, they would have, feature in there a drawing by Rube Goldberg, and it would be something that was really out of control. That he would have somebody, how he had a mechanism for eating cheese, and so it would start off with a candle that would burn down a certain point, which would burn, and when it got to a certain point, it would burn a string. When it burned the string would let loose a ball that would nudge a dog, which would bark at a mouse, which would run away into a hole, tripping a lever that would then move a fork to feed you the piece of cheese. Okay. That's a Rube Goldberg device, and those were great. Okay. So we want to be careful. We don't want to be too brief, and we don't want to be too many words. Just enough to get the point across and maybe a bunch of points. Okay. When you look at B, it's profundity. Okay. James' introduction is brief and says a lot, but I don't think it would be considered a profound statement of doctrine or social concern. Profound interest can usually be a little bit longer to avoid a wrong conclusion, and that's why you don't want to use memes to build your theology on. Okay. Um, okay. See, sensitivity. Sensitivity. He's not being sensitive. In fact, all through everything that's following, he's not being Mr. Sensitive. Was Jesus Christ sensitive when he went to communicate that you shouldn't be buying and selling in the temple? No. What did he use? A scourge of small cords. Okay, he got his point across. Okay, um, the this is why comedians run into trouble because everybody demands that they be politically correct anymore, and then they want their wit silent. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful." Okay, so if a friend causes a wound, it's because he's trying to help you. Now, you don't want to, say something really jerky. Okay, you try to use a little tact, but being sensitive and sparing people of pain might not be the best thing. There's one thing that the Bible does not do. It does not sugarcoat any issue. Although we're advised to be tactful, this should not be done to the point that we end up encouraging somebody to stay in their sin or their rebellion. Okay, so this is all implied by his brevity and why sensitivity is not an issue, profundity is not an issue. Okay. So we come up to verse number 2. Verse number 2. And by the way, those are some great lessons in life. Okay, when you go out in life, okay, you want to have enough to be said. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to underdo it. You want to get as much communicated in just good order. Okay, question number 3 is based on verse number 2, which says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations." I remember when I first ever was reading the word diverse in the Bible, and it looked just like the word divers to me. Okay, modern spelling would be with an E, and then you'd know it'd be diverse, meaning various. Okay, so it's not, you don't have to worry about going out diving. Okay, no problems with scuba diving. Okay, Mr. Emmanuel, can we get a microphone over to Mr. Emmanuel? And what do temptations refer to in this verse?
In verse 2, temptations refer to trials.
Okay.
It can't be enticement because Jesus wouldn't be enticing you to sin. And it can't be opportunities because Jesus wouldn't give you opportunities to sin.
Amen. There you go. Okay, there we go. Yeah, not all temptations are enticements. The word temptations here actually has the idea more of trials. And when you look it up in its various ways, it's translated in the King James Version there, you'll see that it's really more dealing with trials. Okay. People, we're going to see in verse number 14, people are enticed by their own evil desire. It's when the things are mixed with our own evil desire. That's why when Satan approached Jesus Christ on the in the 40 days in the wilderness and the temptation of Christ, he tempted what the first thing he tempted him with was bread because he'd been fasting for those 40 days. It was not an enticement because it was not going to appeal to Jesus Christ. Okay. There are certain sins, certain temptations that might not appeal to you, other ones that might not appeal to me, and you're perfectly safe. It's when it's mixed with our own enticement. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 14 talks about this. It says, having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls and heart that they have exercised with covetous practices. Cursed children, for when they speak great swelling words of vanity, they allure through the lusts of the flesh. Again, see there, through the lusts of the flesh. Okay. The temptation is not the problem. It's what's going on in the flesh. That's the problem. Um, through much wantonness, those that were clean escaped from them who live in error. The word itself, temptation, there means putting to proof. Putting that's it, when you look at its etymology, the parts of the word, putting to proof. And so, so what will happen is how we respond to it. That's where the proof will lie. In this way, we can take joy in trials because of the fruit that is produced in us. We can have that joy, which is going to come up in the next question. So this is done through a diversity of trials where we become more balanced. Selfish opportunities can become a temptation because, as Emmanuel said, God's not going to tempt us with the opportunities. Your character is what you are when no one is looking. Crimes of opportunity. They talk about crimes of opportunity. You might not be somebody who's going to go steal something, but if you saw something that was stealable and you could get away with it, okay, that's what they call a crime of opportunity. Okay, and you might end up doing that just because you had the opportunity. No, we don't get those opportunities.
Pastor, I have a question.
Yes.
Is there always temptation in trials?
Only if we, okay, this is an important point. Only if we act through our covetous self-centeredness. That's when this can come about. It is, when you look at the 10 commandments, the very first commandment is about worshiping God and having no other gods before him. The last commandment is the opposite of that, where we worship ourselves. And so when we are looking for our own self-interest, especially when it's at the expense of somebody else, when our covetousness mixes in with that, that's when we have the problem. If you look down, let me get my to here to when you go down in James chapter 1, we're going to discuss this a little bit sooner. I'm sorry, a little bit later. You go to verse number 14. He says, "But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed." So, so at this point, I am far less tempted with having ice cream than I used to be. Okay. Okay. That was my taste. Then it says in verse number 15, "Then when lust hath conceived," in other words, there's a conception that's taking place. When my lust is mixed with the temptation, it gives birth to the baby sin. Okay. It bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it's finished, bringeth forth death. So there's not necessarily temptation in the object itself, but when you mix it with our lust and us acting and our covetous, self-interest, that's where there's a problem. Let me get to share something in here also.
Thank you.
Joey, if you can hand the microphone over to him.
Yeah, I think sometimes we think of temptations as something that we want that we don't have, or somebody that we want that we shouldn't want. But there are temptations to doubt. There are temptations to fear. I mean, look at all the trials that Job went through. And his wife even said, "Curse God and die." He could have been tempted to just give up on his faith because he had done everything he knew how to do, and yet he went all through these terrible trials. He lost everything, and then he became sick, and he had boils, and just short of the Lord allowing his life to be taken, he just went through every trial that there was. And I think because there's the verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, where it says, "There's no temptation taken you than such as is common to man, that God will not, he'll give you a way to bear it." And there's like a whole following today that says, oh, this only applies to temptations. This is because they don't want to believe that God is always there to help them through everything. They
Yeah.
want to have a way out to say, oh, this is too much. Nobody should be expected to endure this. But they forget about the temptations that we have that just go on in our minds like, I don't deserve this. This is also born
Yeah.
of an entitlement attitude.
Yes.
Why is this happening to me? I've been faithful.
Me.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
or we're tempted to not trust the Lord and just wait and see what he has for us when we're going through a really bad time.
Yeah.
The word temptation and trial, they're so intertwined,
Yes.
and it can take any form of something that you're going through. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I'm tempted to steal this thing, or I'm tempted to lust after more money or something. It could be a temptation to fear or to doubt God.
Yeah.
Or to even sin in your mind, and just get off track, not doing Bible reading or not being in prayer or not being faithful in church, just being slack,
Yeah.
tempted to do those things.
Yeah. I'm
So-
thinking of a sermon I know I got prepared. It's coming up in December. Okay. About love and not thinking of self. And when you just go over the whole character of love, and it has nothing to do with romance, it has everything to do with being able to actually go through suffering and have what they call unrequited love. You didn't have somebody who received the love. Okay. That's the love that Jesus had for us. He loved us so much that he died for us, even if we didn't get saved. Okay. There's nothing desirable about us. And so this sense of me, the love of self, that's what feeds into turning the trials into something that we would be tempted with. Okay, so God doesn't give you that kind of temptation. He does want to prove us. The older I get, the more I realize that just about got to be that way. Okay, I wish it wasn't. Okay. I will, I'm going to close with this, and we'll save the next question for the next time. The Israelites tempted God in the wilderness. Okay, finally, where God said, "Okay, enough of this," and He gave them a big old judgment and everything. But their temptation was this format. It would be kind of like if I came home and I wanted to manipulate Nancy, and I said, "Okay, what have you done for me lately?" As if she hasn't done enough, right? Okay. What have you done for me lately? Well, here's a chance to prove yourself, Nancy. Go get this for me and go do that for me and go wash the car. And, that would be really manipulative to speak that way. Well, this is what they did to God. God, after delivering them from Egypt in a multi-miraculous manner, and they went to God with basically, well, what have you done for us lately, God? Now we don't have any quail or don't have any meat to eat. And so God gave them quail and made them sick with the meat that was coming out their nostrils. So you get this ability to tempt God. Well, except he can't be tempted. so they try to. Okay. Other thoughts that somebody had? Yes, Miss Maya. Yes.
Really, on the statement that you just made, I was thinking of the verse and I found it, Galatians chapter 2, verse 21, when you were talking about, I looked at it as frustrating the grace of God, something that we don't want to do, because the Bible
Right.
teaches us, I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain.
Yes.
The opposite of what we would want.
Yeah, that would be tempting God by sinning all over the place and saying, well, it doesn't matter. Somebody else. Let me get Miss Nora first. Ladies before gentlemen.
When we are thinking about ourselves, we are directing our love towards ourselves, and mostly it is also we are focused on the world and not on God.
Right.
So in First John 2,
Mm-hmm.
Verse 15, it says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him.
Right.
For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh,
Yeah, the
last-
lust again. Yeah, there
and
you
the
go.
lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I should have mentioned, love is a decision to want the best for somebody else. Okay, that goes along with the idea of, of, not wanting stuff for self. And so that is a most appropriate verse because it speaks of, okay, you're not loving this for yourself where you're making an idol out of it and you're ending up serving it. Okay, and that would be one of the things that makes it idolatrous. Brother Tone, yeah.
In fact, right at the beginning, the the innocence of Eve was targeted by Satan by using those those three
Yeah.
things. They
Looks good, that fruit, doesn't it?
yeah, and so that's the technique when we do not guard ourselves instead of being conscious of God's presence in our lives, and we are distracted by physical things, for example, then that's when the devil would take advantage of it and tempt you, and he targets the three things that Nora mentioned right
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, this reminds me of a thing called cognitive distortion. You've heard of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive distortion is a different thing. It's you want to buy something and oh man, you know that thing would be the best thing to get. It would serve so many things. And then you get it and you say, what did I see in this? Okay. You look at that vacation home or that, you're on a vacation home, you see it's all fancy and everything. Boy, I wish I had this. Do you know what it would be like to maintain that home if you actually had it? And then you'd get it and it'd be all fancy. And you say, what did I do this for? Okay. In cognitive distortions, we tend to emphasize those things. We distort those things that favor us doing it. Okay. And we put uh, um, too much worth in it, too much value in that. And we underemphasize the things that are against it. Yeah, but if you do this, you're going to have this problem. Oh, not really. I can handle it. Okay. Then you have it. You're like, what was I thinking? And this is all part of the whole lecture that goes with loving self and wanting stuff for self and putting self first. It distorts our mind. It becomes the temptation because now our lust is involved instead of looking at what do I actually need that I can use to minister to others. One of the things that I love about church is that if everybody's here loving that way and you're not thinking of yourself and everybody is trying to think of everybody else, you're going to end up getting thought of. Okay. You're going to get your needs met. Okay. So like if Tone is trying to think of everybody and not himself, and everybody else is doing the same thing. Okay. They're thinking of Tone too. So he's got 25 thoughts towards people. Well, he's got 25 thoughts coming right back at him. So you end up having that loving relationship by denying self, taking up your cross and following Christ daily. So yeah, this is a whole area that I love to preach on. So, but I'm going to stop for now. We'll get to it. Yes. Okay. Comes in December 1st, I think. That sermon. Okay. Somebody else, thoughts you'd like to share? Okay. Bottom line takeaway, and we can have some nice fellowship. We got the coffee back there. Bottom line takeaway is brevity is good, except I got to fill up a whole half hour. So I'm not going to be too brief, I guess sometimes. Brevity is good. Say it in as few words as possible. Be humble about it. And know this, that when on top of that as you go through trials, it's good. It develops us. We need this. It's not sin to go through trials, only if you add some lust into it. Otherwise, be thankful for the lessons that you learn through through the trials that you go through. And that'll be good in the question that's coming up next.